Ladies and gentlemen, there is a truth we must understand today. Kindness, in its purest form, is a reflection of a powerful heart. It is an attribute that demonstrates humility, strength, and the ability to uplift those around us. Yet, in the world we live in, there is a paradox of kindness, as noble as it is, may sometimes open the door to disrespect. This is a reality we must face, not with bitterness, but with clarity, understanding, and wisdom. Kindness is one of the most powerful and transformative forces in the world. It can change lives, heal wounds, and uplift the brokenhearted. Yet, there is a common misunderstanding that often surrounds kindness, and that is the belief that kindness equals weakness. In a world where success is often measured by power, dominance, and control, it is easy to see why this perception has taken hold. People who are kind are frequently viewed as passive, incapable of standing up for themselves, and easy targets for exploitation. This misunderstanding is not only false, but it also robs people of the true strength that lies in practicing genuine kindness. To understand this, we must first consider what it means to be kind. Kindness is not just about being nice to others or doing good deeds when it is convenient. True kindness is rooted in compassion and empathy. It is a willingness to extend love and understanding to others, even when they may not deserve it. Kindness requires a deep awareness of others' needs and a willingness to put aside your own interests in favor of someone else's well-being. It is an active choice to lift people up, to give them hope, and to show them that they matter. In a world driven by competition and individualism, kindness often stands in stark contrast to the prevailing attitudes of self-interest and self-promotion. Those who practice kindness are often seen as soft or too nice, as if these qualities make them vulnerable or lacking in strength. People who exude kindness are sometimes dismissed as naive, as if their good intentions are simply a mask for their inability to confront challenges head-on. However, this view is a misinterpretation of what kindness truly is. In reality, kindness is not a sign of weakness, it is an indication of strength. It takes great inner strength to be kind in a world that often rewards aggression, ruthlessness, and manipulation. Kindness requires a level of emotional resilience that many people lack. It demands that you remain calm and compassionate, even when those around you may be hostile, indifferent, or ungrateful. When someone shows you disrespect, when they treat you unfairly or take advantage of your good nature, the true test of kindness is not to retaliate, but to continue showing love and respect, despite the pain it may cause you. This is not to say that kindness is without boundaries or that it requires us to tolerate abuse or mistreatment. On the contrary, real kindness is not about being a doormat. It is about choosing to rise above the negativity and choosing to remain steadfast in your values. It takes more courage and strength to stand firm in your principles, to act with integrity, and to respond with kindness, even when the world seems intent on pulling you down. People who misunderstand kindness often fail to see the depth of emotional intelligence required to practice it. To be kind is to recognize that people are flawed, that they make mistakes, and that we all need grace. It is an awareness that others may be struggling with their own battles, and instead of adding to their pain, you choose to be a source of healing. This is not weakness, this is the strength of empathy. True kindness is not about expecting something in return. It is an unconditional act of giving that asks for no payment. This aspect of kindness is often misunderstood by those who view the world through a lens of transactional relationships. In their eyes, kindness should only be extended if there is something to gain in return, whether that be recognition, a favor, or some form of reciprocity. When kindness is not returned in the way they expect, they view it as a sign that the kind person has been taken advantage of or used. However, this mentality is rooted in a misunderstanding of the true nature of kindness. Kindness is a gift that is freely given without attachment to any outcome. It is an expression of love and care, not a bargaining chip or a currency. When we extend kindness with the expectation of something in return, we cheapen its value. But when we give kindness freely, without conditions or expectations, we tap into a higher source of strength. It is a strength that does not rely on others' behavior or opinions, but one that is grounded in the integrity of our own hearts. The world often rewards those who assert themselves forcefully, who push and demand their way, and who are willing to do whatever it takes to win. These individuals may be viewed as strong because they have mastered the art of asserting dominance. But their strength is often rooted in fear and insecurity. They rely on control and manipulation to maintain their position, which ultimately leads to a lack of genuine respect from others. On the other hand, those who practice kindness earn a deeper kind of respect, not based on fear or compliance, but on the strength of their character. In truth, kindness is not about being passive or submissive. It is about being proactive in your desire to make the world a better place. It requires courage to remain kind, especially when faced with hostility or adversity. It takes strength to show compassion to someone who has wronged you, to give your time and energy to help others without expecting anything in return, and to continue spreading love even when it seems like the world is full of darkness. When we learn to recognize the power in kindness, we begin to see that it is not the absence of strength, but the presence of something far more profound. It is the ability to endure hardships without becoming hardened, to show mercy when justice demands punishment, and to love when others choose hate. Kindness is not a weakness, but the highest form of strength, a strength that can transform lives, heal wounds, and change the world for the better. So the next time someone questions your kindness, remember that it is not a sign of weakness, but the truest form of power that you can offer to the world. Unconditional giving is a concept that resonates deeply within our hearts. It speaks to the idea of offering something without expecting anything in return, whether it is time, love, resources, or support. It is a noble and virtuous practice that many aspire to embody in their lives. However, while unconditional giving is often seen as a beautiful and selfless act, it carries a hidden cost that cannot be overlooked. The cost of giving without limits, without boundaries, can sometimes lead to exhaustion, resentment, and ultimately a loss of personal balance. It is crucial to understand these costs in order to give more wisely and sustain the joy and energy that giving is meant to bring. Unconditional giving is about generosity without strings attached. We give simply because we care, because we want to make someone else's life better, or because we feel a deep sense of compassion for others' needs. The beauty of unconditional giving lies in its selflessness. The giver does not ask for recognition or reward. However, this selflessness can quickly turn into a form of self-sacrifice that depletes the giver's own emotional and physical resources. When we give endlessly, without taking time to replenish ourselves, we risk becoming burnt out, disconnected from our own needs, and resentful of the very people we sought to help. One of the primary costs of unconditional giving is the depletion of personal energy. Every time you give, whether it is your time, your attention, your emotional support, or your material resources, there is a transfer of energy. The more you give, the more you expend, and the less you have left for yourself. While it is possible to give generously in the short term, if there is no replenishment of your own energy, it is easy to feel exhausted, drained, and worn out. This exhaustion can manifest itself in physical ways like fatigue or illness, or in emotional ways such as frustration, burnout, and feelings of being overwhelmed. Unconditional giving without boundaries can lead to emotional depletion. Our emotions are deeply interconnected with our energy, and giving without limits can often leave us feeling emotionally bankrupt. When we constantly put others' needs before our own, it is easy to lose sight of our own desires, dreams, and aspirations. We become so focused on others that we neglect our own well-being. Over time, this emotional imbalance can result in feelings of emptiness and a lack of fulfillment. You may start to feel as though your giving is not appreciated or that your efforts go unnoticed, leading to frustration and resentment. Another cost of unconditional giving is the risk of being taken for granted. When you continuously offer your time, your resources, and your support without any expectation of reciprocation, it can create an unspoken assumption that your generosity is limitless. People may begin to expect your help without offering anything in return. This can lead to a sense of entitlement from others, where they take your kindness for granted and fail to recognize the effort and sacrifice behind your giving. As a result, you may start to feel unappreciated and overlooked, which can breed resentment and bitterness. When giving is unconditional, it can sometimes lead to an imbalance in relationships. Healthy relationships are built on mutual respect and reciprocity. When one person continually gives without receiving, the relationship can become unbalanced, with the giver feeling exploited and the receiver feeling entitled. This imbalance can create an unhealthy dynamic where the giver feels as though they are being used, while the receiver may feel no obligation to give anything in return. This can lead to a breakdown in trust and communication, ultimately harming the relationship. The cost of unconditional giving also extends to personal boundaries. We all have limitations, whether it is time, energy, or resources, and when we give without boundaries, we ignore these limitations. By failing to set boundaries, we risk overextending ourselves and losing our sense of self. Healthy boundaries are essential for maintaining balance in our lives and protecting our well-being. Without them, we may find ourselves caught in an endless cycle of giving, never taking time to pause, reflect, or care for our own needs. This lack of boundaries can lead to feelings of resentment toward the people we are trying to help because we feel as though we are giving too much, too often, without regard for ourselves. One of the most subtle costs of unconditional giving is the possibility of enabling others' bad behavior. While it is admirable to help those in need, it is important to remember that unconditional giving does not always lead to positive outcomes. When we give without considering the consequences or the recipient's ability to reciprocate, we may unintentionally enable negative behaviors. For example, if we constantly bail someone out of a difficult situation without addressing the root cause of their problem, we may be preventing them from learning important life lessons or developing the skills needed to stand on their own. In these cases, unconditional giving can perpetuate dependency rather than promote growth and independence. Unconditional giving can sometimes hinder personal growth. If we are constantly focused on meeting the needs of others, we may neglect our own personal development. We may become so caught up in helping others achieve their goals that we forget to invest in our own dreams. The cost of this is a loss of personal fulfillment and the inability to achieve our own potential. It is important to remember that we cannot pour from an empty cup. We must take care of ourselves and invest in our own growth in order to be able to give effectively to others. Unconditional giving is a noble and beautiful act, but it comes with a cost that must not be ignored. While the desire to help others is a commendable quality, it is important to recognize the risks involved in giving without boundaries or consideration for our own well-being. To give sustainably and with joy, we must learn to balance our generosity with self-care, set healthy boundaries, and ensure that our giving is not motivated by a need for approval or recognition. When we understand the costs of unconditional giving and approach it with wisdom and discernment, we can continue to help others while also taking care of ourselves, preserving our energy, and maintaining healthy, balanced relationships. In the pursuit of harmony and approval, many individuals find themselves trapped in the relentless cycle of trying to please everyone around them. This desire to make others happy, to avoid conflict, and to be liked by all is a common struggle, one that many experience at various points in their lives. While the intent behind pleasing others is often rooted in kindness and a genuine desire to connect, it can quickly spiral into a perilous pattern that compromises one's own values, self-worth, and well-being. The perils of pleasing everyone lie not just in the potential for personal dissatisfaction, but also in the erosion of authentic relationships and a loss of one's true identity. The first danger of trying to please everyone is the internal conflict that arises when you put others' needs and desires ahead of your own. When you constantly strive to meet everyone's expectations, you begin to ignore your own feelings, needs, and values. This is especially dangerous because over time, it becomes difficult to differentiate between what you genuinely want and what others expect from you. The line between personal authenticity and the desire for external approval blurs, and you find yourself living a life that is defined by the wishes and opinions of others rather than your own sense of purpose and fulfillment. This internal dissonance often leads to a deep sense of confusion and dissatisfaction. People who try to please everyone can experience an identity crisis as they struggle to reconcile their actions with their true desires. When you are constantly trying to be who others want you to be, you risk losing touch with who you truly are. You may begin to question your own values and preferences, doubting whether your choices are genuinely yours or simply made to satisfy the expectations of others. Over time, this self-doubt can erode your confidence and self-esteem, leaving you feeling lost and unfulfilled. Another peril of pleasing everyone is the exhaustion and burnout that comes from constantly striving to meet the needs of others. The desire to please people can be physically, emotionally, and mentally draining. Every time you prioritize someone else's needs over your own, you expend energy, sometimes without even realizing it. You may go out of your way to accommodate people, to say yes when you want to say no, to offer help when you are already stretched thin, or to suppress your own desires in favor of others. This constant giving without replenishing yourself creates an imbalance, and eventually it takes a toll on your well-being. The result can be emotional burnout, physical exhaustion, or even resentment toward the very people you are trying to please. The act of constantly seeking others' approval often leads to the erosion of healthy boundaries. Healthy boundaries are essential for maintaining balance in any relationship. Yet when we try to please everyone, we sacrifice our personal boundaries in an effort to accommodate others. We may say yes to requests when we should say no, compromise our values to avoid conflict, or neglect our own needs to meet others' expectations. When we fail to set boundaries, we allow others to dictate the terms of our interactions, often to our detriment. This can lead to feelings of being used or taken advantage of as the people around us begin to take our generosity for granted. The inability to say no is another significant consequence of the desire to please everyone. Saying yes to everyone's request, no matter how inconvenient or overwhelming they may be, is a surefire way to drain your energy and lose control of your time. People who constantly try to please others often struggle with setting limits, and as a result, they find themselves overburdened by commitments and responsibilities that they never intended to take on. The more you say yes to others, the less time and energy you have for your own priorities, dreams, and needs. Eventually, this imbalance can lead to feelings of resentment, as you realize that your time and efforts are being consumed by others at the expense of your own well-being. Another peril of attempting to please everyone is that it creates unrealistic expectations. When you constantly try to meet the needs of others, they may begin to expect this behavior from you as a matter of course. The more you accommodate others, the more they may take your kindness for granted, expecting you to continue to put them first without considering your own needs. This can lead to a cycle of unreciprocated effort where you give but never receive the same level of care and consideration in return. Over time, this imbalance can result in feelings of frustration and resentment as you realize that your efforts are being undervalued or ignored. The desire to please everyone can also hinder personal growth and the pursuit of your own goals. When you are constantly focused on making others happy, you become distracted from your own aspirations. You may find it difficult to pursue your own passions, take risks, or make decisions that align with your personal values, because you are so concerned with meeting the expectations of others. As a result, you may find yourself stuck in a cycle of living for others, rather than for yourself. Your own dreams and goals take a backseat to the demands of those around you, and you may begin to feel as though your life is no longer your own. Attempting to please everyone often leads to superficial relationships. When you are constantly adjusting your behavior and choices to meet the expectations of others, the relationships you form may be based on a false version of yourself. People may like you, but they may not be liking the real you. They are liking the version of you that you have created in order to please them. Over time, this can lead to a sense of isolation and loneliness as you realize that the connections you've built are not based on genuine understanding or mutual respect, but on the image you have projected in an attempt to win approval. The perils of pleasing everyone are numerous and profound. While the desire to make others happy is natural and even admirable, it is important to recognize the dangers of constantly sacrificing your own needs and values in the process. The cost of pleasing everyone is the loss of personal identity, emotional exhaustion, compromised boundaries, and a lack of fulfillment. True fulfillment comes from aligning your actions with your own values and desires, not from constantly seeking approval from others. By learning to set boundaries, prioritize self-care, and embrace the authenticity of who you are, you can navigate relationships with greater balance and integrity, and ultimately find more joy and peace in your life. Boundaries are an essential aspect of maintaining personal well-being, fostering healthy relationships, and leading a life that aligns with our values. They are the invisible lines we draw to protect our emotional, mental, and physical space. Boundaries allow us to differentiate between what is acceptable and what is not in our interactions with others, and they empower us to assert our needs and desires without guilt. While boundaries can often feel uncomfortable to establish, especially in a world where people may expect endless generosity or compliance, they are fundamental to living a balanced and fulfilling life. The power of boundaries lies in their ability to protect our sense of self. Without boundaries, we risk losing sight of who we are, what we value, and what we need to thrive. When we fail to set clear boundaries, we allow others to dictate the terms of our relationships, often at the expense of our own well-being. Whether it's a friend, a family member, a colleague, or even a romantic partner, without boundaries, we can easily become overwhelmed by the demands of others. People may begin to take us for granted, assuming that we will always say yes, always be available, and always put their needs before our own. This can lead to resentment, frustration, and burnout. Establishing boundaries gives us the power to decide what we will tolerate and what we will not. It allows us to protect our time, energy, and emotional resources. For instance, when someone makes a request that feels unreasonable or when an obligation feels like a burden, setting a boundary means we have the right to say no without feeling guilty. Saying no is not an act of rejection or selfishness. It is an act of self-preservation and respect for our own limits. By setting boundaries, we take back control of our lives and ensure that we are living according to our values rather than constantly reacting to the needs and expectations of others. In addition to protecting our personal space, boundaries also play a critical role in nurturing healthy relationships. Healthy relationships are built on mutual respect, trust, and understanding. Boundaries help create the foundation for these elements to thrive. Without boundaries, relationships can quickly become one-sided or toxic, with one person doing all the giving and the other taking without considering the other's needs. Establishing clear boundaries allows both parties in a relationship to understand each other's limits and expectations, which in turn fosters a sense of respect and fairness. Boundaries provide the structure that helps individuals relate to one another without overstepping personal space or crossing emotional lines. One of the most significant benefits of boundaries is the ability to cultivate self-respect and self-love. When we respect our own boundaries, we communicate to ourselves that we are worthy of care, attention, and respect. Setting boundaries means recognizing our own value and treating ourselves with the same kindness and consideration that we extend to others. When we allow others to violate our boundaries or when we neglect to establish them altogether, we send the message that we do not prioritize our own well-being. On the other hand, when we establish and enforce healthy boundaries, we reinforce our self-worth and assert our right to prioritize our own needs. Boundaries enable us to engage in more authentic and honest interactions with others. When we fail to set boundaries, we may fall into the trap of people-pleasing, saying yes to things we don't want to do, or agreeing with opinions we don't share. This creates a sense of dishonesty in our relationships as we are not presenting our true selves. By setting boundaries, we open the door to more genuine connections. We create the space for ourselves to express our opinions, desires, and emotions freely without fear of judgment or conflict. Boundaries give us permission to be authentic, which in turn fosters deeper and more meaningful relationships with those around us. Boundaries are also essential in preventing emotional and mental overload. In today's fast-paced world, it's easy to get caught up in the expectations of others, whether it's at work, in social circles, or even within our own families. We may feel pressure to be constantly available, to meet deadlines, to attend every event, or to be the shoulder to lean on for everyone we know. Without boundaries, this constant demand on our time and energy can lead to stress, anxiety, and even depression. By establishing clear limits and learning to say no when necessary, we protect ourselves from emotional and mental exhaustion. Boundaries allow us to preserve our emotional well-being and ensure that we are not overwhelmed by the weight of external demands. Another powerful aspect of boundaries is that they help us protect our values and priorities. Each of us has different goals, passions, and principles that guide our decisions and actions. Without boundaries, it becomes difficult to stay true to these values. We may find ourselves bending to others' expectations or sacrificing our own needs in the name of compromise. But by setting boundaries, we safeguard the things that matter most to us. Boundaries enable us to make intentional choices that reflect our values and ensure that we are living a life that aligns with our true purpose. They act as a filter through which we can assess opportunities and obligations, ensuring that we prioritize what truly serves us and let go of what doesn't. At the same time, it's important to remember that boundaries are not walls, they are lines that can be flexible and adaptable. Boundaries are not meant to isolate us or make us rigid in our relationships with others. Instead, they are meant to be protective structures that allow us to engage with others in a healthy, respectful way. Boundaries should evolve as our needs change and as our relationships develop. They are not meant to be permanent or unchangeable, but rather tools that help us navigate the complexities of life in a balanced and mindful way. The power of boundaries cannot be overstated. Boundaries protect our emotional, mental, and physical well-being. They empower us to take control of our lives, make intentional choices, and prioritize our own needs. Boundaries enable us to engage in healthy relationships, communicate authentically, and preserve our sense of self. While it can be challenging to set boundaries, especially in a world that often expects endless availability and compliance, doing so is essential for leading a fulfilling and balanced life. By respecting our own boundaries, we communicate our value to the world and ensure that we are living in alignment with who we truly are. Expectations are a powerful force in human relationships and interactions. They shape how we view others, how we interpret their actions, and how we respond to the world around us. At their best, expectations can foster growth, set healthy standards, and create a sense of anticipation and motivation. However, when expectations are not communicated clearly or are unrealistic, they can lead to frustration, disappointment, and in some cases, disrespect. The role of expectations in disrespect is deeply intertwined with how they are formed, communicated, and enforced in relationships. One of the most common ways that expectations lead to disrespect is when they are unspoken. In many relationships, whether personal or professional, there is an assumption that the other person should know what is expected of them. These silent expectations can create tension and resentment, as the person who holds the expectation may feel frustrated when the other person doesn't meet it, while the one who is unaware of the expectation may feel unfairly criticized or judged. When expectations are not communicated directly, the person who is expected to act in a certain way is left in the dark, and this often leads to feelings of being misunderstood or disrespected. When people's expectations are not met, it often leads to disappointment, which can manifest in a variety of ways. If the person with unmet expectations feels strongly about the issue, they may express their frustration in a disrespectful manner, accusing the other person of not caring, being inconsiderate, or being negligent. However, this reaction is rooted in the person's own unspoken expectations and the belief that others should inherently know what they want or need. This is where respect becomes compromised when individuals expect others to behave in a certain way without explicitly communicating it. They fail to honor the autonomy and individuality of those they are interacting with. Instead of addressing the situation constructively, they may instead display passive-aggressive behavior, make assumptions, or place blame without understanding the underlying causes of the discrepancy. Expectations can breed disrespect when they are unrealistic. In a world where everyone has their own unique strengths, weaknesses, experiences, and limitations, expecting another person to meet an idealized or unreasonable standard can be deeply disrespectful. Unrealistic expectations are rooted in an inability or unwillingness to see others for who they truly are and to accept that people are not perfect. These expectations often stem from a desire to control or manipulate others to fit a particular mold, whether it's in a romantic relationship, a friendship, or the workplace. When someone is held to a standard they cannot realistically achieve, it can make them feel inadequate, unsupported, and ultimately disrespected. They may feel that no matter how hard they try, they will never be enough because the expectations placed on them are out of reach. This issue can become particularly harmful when these unrealistic expectations are tied to one's identity. For example, in relationships, one partner may expect the other to fulfill all of their emotional needs or to meet all their expectations in every area of life. This can place an enormous amount of pressure on the other person, leading them to feel overwhelmed, undervalued, or unappreciated. In such cases, the one holding the expectation is disrespecting the autonomy of the other person by failing to recognize that they are not responsible for fulfilling every need or desire. Similarly, in a work environment, employees may be expected to work long hours, constantly exceed performance targets, or take on tasks outside their job description, often without proper compensation or acknowledgement. These unrealistic expectations undermine the value of personal time and well-being, fostering an environment where employees feel exploited or disrespected. Expectations also lead to disrespect when they create a dynamic of entitlement. When someone expects something from another person without offering anything in return, it can lead to feelings of imbalance and resentment. For example, in a friendship, one person may expect constant emotional support or time, without offering the same level of attention or care in return. In this case, the imbalance of expectations can cause the one doing the giving to feel used, taken for granted, and disrespected. Similarly, in a family or romantic relationship, one partner may expect the other to sacrifice their own interests, desires, or goals for the sake of the relationship. Over time, these unbalanced expectations can lead to a breakdown in trust and respect, as one person feels overwhelmed by the weight of constantly meeting the needs of the other. The role of expectations in disrespect can be exacerbated by a lack of empathy. Expectations that are not grounded in empathy and understanding often fail to account for the complexities of other people's lives. When one person places demands or expectations on another without considering their circumstances, struggles, or emotional state, it can feel as though their perspective is being disregarded. Disrespect arises when one person's needs or desires take precedence over the well-being or needs of the other. This lack of consideration often leads to frustration, as the person on the receiving end of these expectations feels as though they are being treated as an object to fulfill the other's desires, rather than as a whole, autonomous person with their own rights and needs. Unmet or unrealistic expectations can cause a person to lose respect for themselves. When we constantly place expectations on ourselves that are difficult or impossible to meet, we may start to internalize feelings of inadequacy or guilt. This can lead to self-doubt and diminished self-worth. The pressure to meet these expectations, especially when they are unrealistic or imposed by others, can cause anxiety and self-criticism. In such cases, we may disrespect ourselves by failing to honor our own boundaries, needs, and values, instead trying to meet the impossible standards set by others or by our own inner critic. The key to avoiding the perils of unrealistic or unspoken expectations lies in open communication, empathy, and self-awareness. We must learn to set realistic, healthy expectations that consider the needs, desires, and limitations of everyone involved. By being clear about our expectations and asking for clarity in return, we can avoid misunderstandings and prevent feelings of disrespect. It is equally important to be flexible and to adjust our expectations when circumstances change or when we realize that our demands are too high. Building empathy helps us see things from the other person's perspective, which allows for mutual understanding and respect. And perhaps most importantly, we must learn to value ourselves enough to set boundaries, assert our needs, and walk away from situations where we feel disrespected by the expectations placed on us. The role of expectations in disrespect is significant and multifaceted. Whether they are unspoken, unrealistic, or rooted in entitlement, unmet or miscommunicated expectations can lead to frustration, resentment, and the erosion of respect in relationships. It is essential to cultivate awareness, empathy, and open communication to avoid the pitfalls of unrealistic expectations and to ensure that we approach others with kindness, understanding, and respect. By managing our expectations and fostering mutual understanding, we can build relationships based on trust, respect, and healthy boundaries. The wisdom to walk away is a profound concept, one that holds the power to transform lives and relationships. It requires self-awareness, courage, and emotional intelligence to know when to let go, whether it be of a relationship, a situation, or a particular path in life. Often we are taught to fight for what we want, to persevere through challenges, and to hold on even when things get tough. While perseverance is undoubtedly a valuable trait, there are moments when walking away is the wisest and most empowering choice. Recognizing when to walk away is not about giving up, it is about protecting your well-being, preserving your dignity, and making space for something better in your life. The first and most important aspect of walking away wisely is understanding your worth. When you know your value, you are less likely to tolerate situations or relationships that diminish it. People who are unaware of their worth often stay in toxic or unfulfilling circumstances because they believe they don't deserve better or they fear the unknown. However, walking away from something that no longer serves you is an act of self-respect. It signifies that you are choosing to honor your own needs, feelings, and aspirations over the discomfort of staying in an unhealthy situation. This may mean walking away from a job that undervalues you, a friendship that drains you, or a romantic relationship that has become toxic. The wisdom to walk away is rooted in the belief that you are worthy of peace, happiness, and respect, and that settling for anything less is not an option. Walking away requires emotional courage, the strength to confront discomfort and uncertainty. Letting go of what you know, even if it's no longer beneficial, can be incredibly difficult. It's natural to resist change, especially when it involves stepping into the unknown. Whether it's the fear of being alone, the fear of failure, or the fear of disappointing others, these emotions can hold us back from making the brave decision to walk away. Yet it is precisely this courage to face discomfort that brings growth. In life, staying in situations out of fear often leads to stagnation, frustration, and bitterness. Walking away, on the other hand, opens the door to new opportunities, new perspectives, and new possibilities. It's in these moments of courage that we find our true strength and resilience. Another critical element in knowing when to walk away is understanding when something or someone is no longer aligned with your values. Our values serve as our internal compass, guiding us through life and helping us make decisions that are in line with our true selves. When we find ourselves in situations that conflict with these values, it can create a sense of internal dissonance. Whether it's a job that requires compromising your ethics, a relationship where respect and trust have been eroded, or a community that doesn't honor your identity, staying in these situations can cause long-term emotional and psychological harm. The wisdom to walk away comes from recognizing when your values are being compromised and making the conscious decision to remove yourself from those circumstances. This process allows you to protect your integrity and continue living in alignment with who you are. It's also important to recognize that walking away doesn't necessarily mean abandoning something or someone forever. Sometimes walking away is about taking a temporary step back to gain perspective or to heal. It can also be an opportunity to reassess the situation with a clear mind and a fresh perspective. For example, walking away from a heated argument or a toxic work environment might provide the emotional distance needed to think clearly and make decisions that are best for your future. In relationships, walking away temporarily can allow both parties to cool down and reflect on the issues without the heat of the moment clouding judgment. It is not a sign of weakness, but a powerful act of emotional intelligence, recognizing when you need space to regain your clarity and strength. Walking away also requires the wisdom to accept that not everything is meant to last forever. In our lives, there are people, jobs, and situations that we may hold on to simply because they have been a part of our lives for a long time. We may feel obligated to stay because of history, loyalty, or fear of change. However, the wisdom to walk away comes from the understanding that everything has a season, and some chapters are meant to end. Clinging to something that has run its course often prevents us from embracing the new and the unknown. It is only by letting go that we create space for new experiences, growth, and opportunities. This act of release is liberating, allowing us to move forward with a renewed sense of purpose and possibility.